I'm pretty sure that you've heard the claim that RTS is a dead genre, that it has no future, no place in the modern gaming world. But 2024 and early 2025 proved otherwise. We saw the release of several new and surprisingly solid strategy games. Just take a look at Tempest Rising. It got strong reviews, did well commercially, and seemed to genuinely resonate with lots of players. Is it a comeback then? On the surface, it's hard to say that the genre is dead. Just browsing Wikipedia shows that between 2010 and 2025, dozens of RTS games were released across a wide spectrum of styles and themes. But here's the thing, I find myself losing interest in almost all of them fairly quickly. At first, I figured maybe the problem was me. Maybe I was just burned out after years of playing different RTS games, including StarCraft 2, and RTS genre as a whole has always been my favorite genre. But then I kinda realized I just don't feel the same disinterest with, let's say, FPS games. So what's the problem? Now, in this video I'm not going to dive into the usual reasons why the genre declined. Yeah, we all know about MOBA, shifting player tastes, and also the rise of PlayStation and Xbox, where RTS never really worked well. And of course the fact that AAA game development has become insanely expensive. That's all been discussed to death. But what's really interesting is that 2024 saw 36 new RTS releases, the most we've had in over a decade. That's a number we haven't seen since the golden era of this genre. So why does it still feel like RTS is kinda dead? Why are we mostly playing the same old games from 20 or 10 years ago? After thinking about it for a while, I came to a hard truth. Most modern RTS games feel blunt and soulless. They simply cannot compete with the charm and creativity of old-school titles. And I don't just mean the titans like StarCraft or Age of Empires. Even many mid-tier games from that era had more spark than what we are seeing today. Back then, RTS games were mainstream. Everyone knew what Warcraft, StarCraft or Command & Conquer or Age of Empire was. These games sold millions of copies and were cultural touchstones. And now, most RTS releases are low-budget indie projects scraping by with limited resources. Does this automatically make them worse? Well, not at all. In fact, indie games today often outshine AAA titles in creativity and some cool ideas, but the indie RTS scene is still, in my opinion, pretty weak. Outside of a few standouts like Frostpunk, Diabillions or maybe Manor Lords, there is really not that much to get excited about. The problem, I think, is that the genre almost hit its creative ceiling. Almost every new RTS is either a remake, remaster or spiritual successor to something that we've already been playing for quite some time. If it's not a direct remake, it's a game so heavily inspired by old titles that it practically borders on plagiarism. Stormgate and Tempest Rising come to mind. And if it's not that, then it's a sequel to a well-established franchise like Company of Heroes 3. But there's one thing that all these modern games seem to have in common: a lack of fresh ideas. No identity, no soul. I kept asking myself why so many recent RTS games failed to grab me and, captivate my attention, and the answer kept coming back to pretty much this: they are safe, uninspired, and basically creatively bankrupt. Let's just take a look at a few examples. Take Stormgate. I won't even go this time into how rough the state of the game was at release, but just look at the core concepts. Everything screams StarCraft 2 clone, and yeah, of course they're doing better now, they're trying to deviate, they're introducing a lot of really great new ideas, but this problem is still quite obvious. And sure, it's being made by ex-Blizzard devs who clearly wanted to make their own StarCraft, but what they delivered feels like a knockoff. The races, the units, even the gameplay, it all echoes the Zerg, Terran and Protoss so blatantly that it's really hard to not compare those two games. Yes, fans of this genre might enjoy the callbacks, but without anything new, comparisons will always favor the original. It's, when you are traveling and somebody says, "This is the Alps of our region," you're not really hyping up the local landscape, you're just highlighting how it's not Switzerland, and that's it. Stormgate suffers exactly from that. There are barely any fresh mechanics, the unit designs are forgettable, and it really struggles to add a new layer of depth about what was already introduced in StarCraft 2 and some other RTS games. Of course, the good part is that now they're really trying to make something new out of it, but again, there's just so much work to do. Then there is Company of Heroes 3, a sequel from a completely different studio called Relic Entertainment. This one decided not to innovate on Company of Heroes 2 and instead dug up concepts from the first game, banking on players' nostalgia. Even some of the battle groups, unit types and faction styles were lifted directly from the original. The first Company of Heroes had an incredible single-player experience, serious tone, solid writing and also memorable cutscenes inspired by war films like Save It Private Ryan. The second one, though it was a bit controversial in some countries like Russia because of its take on Soviet Union and Red Army, it still carried dramatic weight and it had a very nice atmosphere, and also really nice gameplay as well. And Company of Heroes 3, well, not so much. The missions are okay gameplay-wise, but the storytelling is weak and emotionally flat, especially the Africa campaign because it's told through the lens of a local woman caught in a crossfire of colonial powers. It's an interesting idea, sure, but it just doesn't really work in the RTS format, because you play a mission as an Axis commander and then you're being told that you're a bad guy.
Are we the baddies?
Which is obviously true, but still, you know, there's just this disconnect between cutscenes and gameplay, and that's really glaring because, well, the characters that you see in the cutscenes, they do not really appear in the gameplay, they have no role in what's going on the battlefield, and there's just little to no connection. It would make much more sense if the game was told from the perspective of the British forces, but not from the Axis side. And there are other games that do the same thing much better, as Battlefield did with their campaign with the Tiger, for example. And the overall atmosphere is also a downgrade. From sound design to voice work to music, just nothing sticks. To be fair, the multiplayer is in a much better shape now than at launch, and it feels really good. And it's got 4 cool factions and some unique units as well. It's a really decent game, but it still doesn't hit the heights you would expect from a major sequel, and only recently has it managed to catch up to the online numbers of the 12-year-old Company of Heroes 2. Now let's briefly talk about Tempest Rising as well. I know some people love it, but I honestly don't get the hype about this game. It's a decent RTS with strong visuals and good music, and the faction mechanics are fine, but the campaign and world building just do not compare to the games it's clearly emulating. It's a Command and Conquer that you have at home. And one Steam review called it CNC flavored product, and I kinda feel that's exactly right. There are no memorable characters, no wild plot twists, no uniquely crazy units. The only standout is maybe the Dynasty Steel Ball or whatever it's called. The game launched with only 2 factions and feels like there is just not enough content to stick around. The current Steam player count is also around 500 or 400, and that's kinda close to Red Alert 3, which came out ages ago. And again, Tempest Rising is a commercial success in many ways, but it just doesn't inspire or surprise. It's all very safe. It's like, hey kid, do you want to revisit those old memories from when you were young? And that's basically it. Alright, this was a really hot take and I probably stirred up a war in the comments about that, but let me wrap this up with the main point of this video. I really miss the wild creativity that defined the golden age of RTS genre. 25 years ago, there were no rigid genre rules, no sacred cows. Studios were experimenting constantly, throwing out insane ideas just to see what would stick. And often, it really worked. The innovation wasn't always in visuals or sound, but in gameplay and world building. Let's be real, many old-school RTS games were not technically good. They were really sloppy, some were glitchy, unbalanced, janky-looking messes. But they stuck with you because they were trying something different, they were trying to impress you, they were trying to surprise you, and they were not playing it safe. Take Impossible Creatures for example, a game where you could literally fuse animals together to create custom combat units. The concept was nuts, the lore was kinda goofy, and yeah, the balance was off, but it was still unforgettable. Also, it came out when the internet was not as widespread and you wouldn't really get easy access to tons of guides and meta strategies, which made it very exciting to play with your freshly created animals and strategies. Or take Army Man RTS. Objectively, kind of a mess with clunky gameplay and annoying voice lines, but the idea is kinda cool. A toy soldier war set in backyards, basements and sandboxes. That's really cool. And that's the kind of weird, wonderful charm that you don't really forget. One of my all-time favorites is Heroes of Annihilated Empires. That's a game from a Ukrainian studio, so many of you probably have never heard about it, but that's a really great one, because that's a fantasy RTS that realized it couldn't really go toe-to-toe with Warcraft 3, so it did its own thing. It has unique visuals, a bookish fantasy aesthetics, and massive battles with hundreds of units on screen. It didn't have a legendary story, but the scale and vibe were unmatched. It was also one of the first RTS games that let you choose between playing solely as a hero with leveling up and buying items like it's a MOBA game, or just playing a normal RTS with base building, and that was a pretty dope idea for that time. Or maybe let's talk about Supreme Commander. That game was brilliant in design, scale and tech, but largely overlooked at launch because CNC and StarCraft took the spotlight. And now it's a cult classic with a loyal fanbase. A really great game because it had a lot of unique mechanics that were first introduced in this series. Actually, they were in total annihilation back then, but you know, Supreme Commander really mastered everything and it was a really great game. And I believe that era showed what happens in a free market where studios compete on ideas and they not just polish, you know? Even the weird mid-tier games could surprise you. Games like S.W.I.N.E brought new systems like fuel and ammo management or veteran unit transfers between missions. Those are small tweaks that change the experience entirely. Rise of Nations let you run through the whole areas of civilization in one RTS game, hilariously letting cavemen smack tanks if you didn't tech up fast enough. Is it dumb? Well, perhaps, but it's also very fun. And I miss that part of gaming. Don't get me wrong, today we still get clever and exciting games, but there are just fewer of them. Most new RTS releases feel like technically solid clones, rehashing old ideas without the spirit that made those classics so memorable. Back then, nearly every new RTS brought something fresh. Now, it's a mix of déjà vu and nostalgia. One hell of a drag, but it's still not enough to feel as high as we were when playing those old scrappy games back when we were younger. That's it for today. What's your take on this? Leave your opinion in the comments, and thank you for watching. Have a nice day, see you next time.